In the first part of the Rampage trilogy, Bill Williamson went on a wild killing spree in his hometown of Tenderville. He killed his best friend with chilling ease and cleverly staged the events to pin the blame on him. After vanishing for 2 years, Bill resurfaced with an online video where he took responsibility for the massacre, calling it his grand solution to overpopulation and resource shortages.
I will exhibit my own brand of population control. Let's just clean the world.
3 years have passed since the events, and now he's become a legendary figure in extremist circles with a huge fan base backing him. Despite the ongoing manhunt across multiple states, the authorities still haven't found him. He's managed to stay off the radar and hide out in Tenderville. We see him once again assembling homemade bombs, surrounded by an arsenal of weapons and his self-made bulletproof armor, looking like he's gearing up for another big disaster. Later that night, he sneaks into the basement of a TV station disguised as a worker. He plants the bombs in different spots and sets up a camera to keep an eye on the entrance. On his way back, he bumps into a couple of homeless men and suggests they should try robbing people to make some cash. The homeless man number 1 replies that he'd rather stay free and broke than risk winding up behind bars.
What kind of freedom is this? Can't even cross the town. Can't buy a bus ticket, right?
Bill counters by saying that at least in jail they'd get free food, heating, and water, ironically pointing out that taxpayers are paying for it. The following day, successful TV anchor Chip Parker starts his day by complaining about his team. He even takes his frustrations to his producer.
Most of these people I work with are incompetent.
But his producer Andy doesn't seem to be too concerned about the situation. In case you didn't notice it, this character Andy is played by Uwe Boll, the director of the movie and such a good actor that you'll only catch him in his own movies. Later on, Chip goes live on air, delivering a monologue based on journalist Julian Assange's transcripts. He begins to describe a unique kind of information that reveals how various institutions behave.
All institutions, all are engaged in unjust activities. Some obviously greatly exceed that of others.
According to Assange, whenever someone tries to access and publish this kind of information, the processes always manage to erase it from our entire public knowledge. This, he points out, is why such information remains obscure to the public. As he wraps up his speech, Chip highlights the reason behind this pervasive censorship.
That is, if knowledge can be drawn out, then some action will take place which will result in some kind of reform.
Meanwhile, Bill is listening to Chip's monologue while he loads up his guns. He gives himself a badass new look by shaving his head, then gathers the remaining bombs and all his weapons. He puts on his Kevlar armor once more and starts setting fire to everything he touched, making sure to leave no trace behind. He jumps into his license plate-free Honda and speeds away from the inferno he created. His first stop is where he had a chat with the homeless guy last night. Upon arrival, he finds out that number 2 has died from the cold. He warns number 1 that he's going to be next if he doesn't do something about it. Bill then casually takes a seat nearby and starts cold-bloodedly shooting at every passerby. After taking out a few people, he makes his way to the bingo hall where he spared the elderly bingo players in the first part, only to find it closed.
All right, no bailout for you.
Bill heads straight for Chip's workplace, the WK7 TV station. He begins the chaos by blowing up his own car, creating such a scene that Mr. Boll must have needed a cigarette after watching it. Upon entering the office, he opens fire on anyone who dares to speak, panic, or flee. Bodies drop like flies with every tick of the clock. The only survivors are those clever enough to hide, including Chip and his producer, whom Bill goes straight for.
Chip, 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 chip.
Even though Bill is the newest member of the Bald People's Club, he starts making fun of Andy.
Hey, Baldy!
His main target is Chip at the moment, but he takes the time to threaten the producer to stay put, as he's going to need him later. Bill forces Chip to join the rest of the employees he's already taken hostage. With Bill's yelling and giving orders, they're all led down to the basement where he takes full control. Everyone is told to sit on the floor with their backs against the wall except for Chip, who's forced to sit in a chair.
Listen, I'd rather sit with them if that's...
Sit in a chair. Don't act like you're on the same level as these people. All of a sudden, you asshole.
When one of the hostages dares to sit in another chair, Bill shoots him dead with no second thought. Bill uses this as a brutal example and warns the others that they won't get hurt as long as they follow his orders. After taking out nearly half the people in the news station, all of a sudden Bill starts showing a sympathetic side.
Chip, you look after that woman. She's crying. Go see if she's okay.
When the police and SWAT team show up after Andy's call, he tries to explain just how bad things are. But they're clueless until they head upstairs and see the carnage firsthand. Bodies everywhere, some dead, others barely hanging on. Realizing there are still hostages in the basement, Police Chief Mark quickly starts giving the necessary orders without knowing that Bill is behind all of this. The entire building is surrounded by the SWAT team. Bill seems to be stuck in a place with only one way in and out. The SWAT team can't just barge in, though. The air vents are too tight to crawl through, and busting through the front door would only put the hostages in even more danger. Meanwhile, Chip is in full panic mode, desperately trying to negotiate and telling Bill that he'll do anything to end this nightmare. But Bill just wants him to drag the man he just killed out of sight, allowing him to use the blue shirt guy as a cleanup crew. Once that's taken care of, Bill lays out his big demand. He hands Chip a disc and insists that it must be broadcast nationwide, but that's not all he wants. He wants a personal interview after his DVD premiere. Bill threatens to kill everyone if his demands are not met in 1 hour. Left with no choice, Chip agrees but tries to secure a promise from Bill that no one will be harmed until he gets back. Bill, of course, doesn't give him that satisfaction. Stepping out of the panic room, Chip spots Officer Mark and reveals the identity of the hostage taker.
He is back. That man in there, that's Bill Williamson, the man responsible for the biggest AMOC run in U.S. history.
I was there last time.
This triggers a vivid flashback for Mark as he's a survivor of that massacre. Chip then dashes off to meet Bill's demands, but things go south fast. Not knowing what the heck he's going to do, Chip goes back to Mark and tells him how he messed up. And the officer somehow convinces him to head back to the hostage taker. He tells Chip that Bill's only pulling this stunt to get that disc aired, so he surely has another copy.
Just go back in there and we'll have you covered.
You have me covered.
When Chip returns with the shattered DVD, Bill completely loses it. He's furious and starts talking in a mocking tone, saying he has to kill everyone now. Chip is forced to kneel down and he prepares for his end. As he begs for his life, Bill surprises him by pulling out another DVD.
You always make two, Chip. You always make a double.
Chip rushes over to Andy, shouting at him to get the DVD on air immediately. Wasting no time, he heads out to gather a crew for what's going to be the most intense interview of his life. Despite all of this, Bill's busy telling the hostages how little Chip cares about them.
He doesn't know your name. He calls you man, calls you dude, because he makes the money.
Seeing one of the hostages wearing yoga pants, Bill immediately assumes she's into yoga. He then forces her to do a vinyasa flow and downward dog just for his twisted amusement. As he humiliates her, Bill starts putting together some theories about her life. A rich housewife with a nanny for her kids and a fancy lawyer husband.
Your rich husband, he cheats and he double dips his clients. He steals so that you can feel like a better person. When the children fall and scrape their knee, who do they run to? They run to the nanny. They don't run to you.
Weirdly, these made-up stories and this kind of lifestyle make him insanely angry. He decides to take out his frustration on the woman and kill her on the spot.
Where is your yoga bullshit now? Did you guys see a spirit? Did you see a spirit or a soul? That's just nothing. It's just a piece of meat now.
Bill's next twisted game starts when another woman starts staring at him. Turns out she's the twin sister of the waitress he murdered at the chicken den in the first movie. She steps out of her shell and lets loose a torrent of curses at him. Her rage is so intense that she starts moving towards Bill, saying she wants to kill him.
What are you gonna do? You gonna punch me? Get out of here.
At this point, Bill instructs the blue shirt guy to beat her up, threatening to kill both if he refuses.
Pretend she's your wife. She just cheated on you.
Blue is hesitant at first, but with no other option, he starts hitting the woman while Bill cheers him on, clearly loving every second. When the woman's nose gets bloody, Blue stops and declares he'd rather die than keep hitting her. Surprisingly, Bill is impressed by his guts and spares him. Instead, he heads to the back of the room while messing with his bags and warning everyone else to stay put. Meanwhile, Andy is busy making calls to get the disc aired, Chip is rounding up a crew for the big interview, and Mark is cooking up a plan. Mark's idea is to get Bill's parents on the phone to talk to him. He hopes this emotional moment will make Bill vulnerable and open a window to take him down. They plan to have a disguised agent sneak in with Chip's crew to pull it off. In the meantime, Bill is berating Chip for his inaction, frustrated that he hasn't finished the one thing he was supposed to do. The 1-hour deadline is up, and Bill starts threatening to kill all the hostages, putting all the blame on Chip, whom he believes is probably running away right now. Right at that moment, Bill gets bombarded with messages from his diehard fans that tell him his video is finally going live on air.
And by the way, Y-O-U''RE means you are. Y-O-U-R means you're.
Bill begins his speech by stating that he's about to share some uncensored facts, even if it leads to his death. First on his list is the topic of gun control. He mentions that 11,000 people in America get shot every year because of it, which is even part of why he can do what he does. Next, he mentions the fact that America has 25% of the world's prisoners, claiming that this is due to the powerful lobbying efforts of the prison industry. Borrowing a page from the revelations of Snowden and Assange, Bill points out how the government monitors people's information. He also believes that the widespread opposition to healthcare programs that could benefit 95% of the population is a direct result of the media's brainwashing tactics. Next on his hit list is a critique of past presidents whom he accuses of committing war crimes in countries totally unrelated to the 9/11 attacks, while maintaining friendly relations with nations that finance those attacks, all because of their oil resources. Meanwhile, Uwe Boll is enthusiastically validating every word he and Fletcher wrote. As he wraps up his speech, Bill urges his viewers to stand up and join a public revolution, stressing that he needs their help to make a real change.
You get out there, and you rip Washington apart. You hunt down the billionaires, the bank bosses, the CEOs, the scumbags and the liars, the governors, the lobbyists. You hang them from the first tree that you can find.
By this point, Chip has rounded up his crew and heads over to Chief Mark, who explains the plan to Chip and hands him a phone with Bill's dad on the other end. Chip, his crew, and the agent in disguise head into the hostage room while cameras broadcast the scene live across the nation. The agent awkwardly takes on the vital task of organizing the cables and shows that he's indeed as advertised.
He's a trained agent. He will be there just for your protection.
This is enough for Bill to have a suspicious eye on him. Chip hands the phone to Bill and lets him know his dad's on the line. Mr. Williamson, who hasn't spoken to Bill in a long time, tries to calm him down, but Bill is only interested in hearing about his mom. When he learns she died in a car accident 6 months ago, he is shocked and then starts laughing nervously. In an unexpected twist, Bill reveals that he's wise to the cop in the room. He immediately shoots the man before he can even blink, and then turns his anger on Chip. On the other hand, Mark's got 3 teams on standby ready to storm in at any second. Using the cameras and the bombs he rigged the night before, Bill immediately spots them and takes them out one by one with his explosions. Later, Bill gets so mad that he wants to wipe out everyone in the room, but Chip somehow talks him down and convinces him to proceed with the interview. Chip starts asking Bill some personal questions, but Bill deftly flips the questions right back at him. Since Chip was reading Assange's statements before, Bill is eager to see how deeply Chip has bought into that narrative. Chip admits that while he finds Assange's words quite persuasive, he's still a staunch believer in the Constitution and law and order. This predictably sends Bill into yet another passionate monologue about his theories.
It's a control mechanism for the rich. They are the law and order. They made the Constitution to protect the money and the land they stole.
Bill believes that the rich are perpetually above the law and indifferent to it. As examples, he points to the owners of major companies in Germany like BMW, BASF, and VW. He mentions the oligarchs in Russia and the royal family in London, all of whom, according to Bill, have immunity from legal consequences. In the US of A, Bill contends the wealthy elite have established the most sophisticated internal security ever, which has severely compromised people's basic constitutional rights and civil liberties. He also sees Chip and his news station as part of an elaborate disinformation machine designed by the rich to flood the nation with lies. As Bill goes on, he once again criticizes maintaining friendly relations with Arab allies just for their money, pointing out that these allies are executing people daily, killing homosexuals, and giving women no rights. In response, Chip advises Bill to take meaningful steps to change this situation, such as getting elected, forming a party, or using democratic processes to make his voice heard. He also asks Bill if he really thinks that killing innocent people is a solution. Bill, however, believes that there is no point in being elected because, in his view, lobbyists are the ones who control everything, and politicians are merely their well-paid puppets. He even questions the very existence of true democracy, suggesting that voices are only heard as long as they make no change. Bill also rationalizes the killing of innocents by pointing to issues like resource shortages, population growth, global warming, the economic crisis, and reckless money printing.
We have more and more people on the planet and less water, food, gas, and oil. In 100 years, there will be no Earth anymore. The only way that I can affect these lives is by taking them away.
In his opinion, even though humanity has moved away from violence and animal hunting, these actions are part of human nature inherited from early humans. He goes on to describe with disturbing enthusiasm how satisfying he finds it to kill someone. Chip's final question is about Bill's mother. He wonders if Bill believes his mother would approve of his actions. Despite having had a deeply close bond with his mother and feeling a deep sadness over her passing, Bill states that life must go on, and there are matters far greater than his mother's approval. After the interview, Chip is curious about Bill's next move. Bill says that he's going to stick to his promise. All the hostages will be released, well except for Chip, who must stay and die with him. With that said, Bill impulsively shoots Chip in the arm. He orders the hostages to head outside and then puts on his mask to avoid being smoked out.
We do this the old-fashioned Alamo way.
As the hostages rush towards the exit, the good-for-nothing SWAT team and the ever-competent Chief Mark bursts in. A big shootout ensues as Bill opens fire with his 2 machine guns. The misfortune magnate Mr. Blue is caught in the crossfire and is shot. The SWAT team suffers casualties too, but Bill remains unscathed in his bulletproof armor and makes a dash to the back of the room once he runs out of ammo. Mark goes after him but is faced with a series of explosives. In the last few seconds, Mark frantically tries to disconnect the bombs from the detonator. However, his attempts backfire and results in a massive explosion that destroys the entire building and claims the lives of everyone inside, including the wounded Chip. As Bill makes his getaway through an underground tunnel, changing clothes and leaving the area, we can hear a news anchor talking about the explosion. She says 128 people have died so far, and the authorities think Bill was also one of them. It looks like Bill set up the bombs when he briefly stepped to the back of the room, later escaping through a narrow tunnel he had dug last night before leaving the building. In the last scene, we see Bill completely lose any sense of morality. He gives a gun to a little girl, teaching her how to use it on her parents, her teachers, and eventually herself. In the end, Bill gets away without facing any consequences, and the movie ends with the chilling scene of the kid holding the gun.